This is the i-Cybie, a wildly overly complicated toy from the early 2000s. And this is 4 of them. Well, this one's an organ donor. And this is an Arduino-based cartridge programmer that I reverse engineered and redesigned for it. So I can do wild and wacky stuff like make it say things that it was never intended to.
Bitchin', come get some rockin'.
So how did I end up with so many of these obnoxiously noisy robots? And more importantly, why did I waste so much time reverse engineering a cartridge programmer for a vintage toy? Well, mostly because of nostalgia. You see, I had one of these as a kid because of course I did.
While I design my own robots now, I was designing far worse robots as far back as high school. Robot toys always fascinated me, but what I always wanted was a Sony AIBO, a hyper-advanced robot dog from the future. Unfortunately, the $1,500 price tag was a bit much for most consumers. Whoa, Mom, can we get Sony AIBO? No, hun, we have AIBO at home. Yeah, the i-Cybie was a full-blown budget AIBO clone, with 16 motors, a handful of sensors, 3 separate processors, and a much cheaper price tag of only $200. Despite its age and cost-cut engineering, I find the complexity of this toy impressive even today. Whether it's the multiple CPUs, motor drivers, dozens of wiring harnesses and sensors, and every square millimeter of the internal frame doubling as a gearbox, there's a lot going on here. The original designer even mused about how it was likely the most complicated toy ever put on the shelf, and he's probably right. I have no clue how this ever made it to market, and unfortunately, it didn't really do that well once it did hit the market. At the end of the day, it was ultimately a far less functional AIBO clone, which was already kind of a niche product. Yeah, it's technologically impressive, but in real-world play, the slow and noisy motion coupled with limited intelligence makes it a little too boring a bit too quickly, which is why I always wanted to hack it.
And then once I got it, I remembered all the accessories.
One of the main accessories for the i-Cybie was a walk-up charger, and the code to make it work was added to the robot via an expansion cartridge. A cartridge programmer was also released, allowing modders to develop a handful of tools to write your own personality files, including custom sounds. Wanting to finally unleash the full potential of my i-Cybie, I scoured eBay waiting for that elusive programmer to show up, and while I did get a hold of the walk-up charger and some spare robots, I really started giving up hope of ever seeing that programmer.
So with walk-up chargers able to be found but no cartridges or programmers, it was pretty obvious that I had to take matters into my own hands.
Of course, what good is a programmer if you don't have a cartridge? If the cartridge in your i-Cybie is a totally blank PCB from a later model, you're out of luck. Thankfully though, most i-Cybies came with a dummy cartridge complete with traces, but no components. To turn this into a proper working cartridge, all we need to do is populate it with 2 surface mount capacitors and 2 flash memory chips. Thankfully, these chips are still readily available, and they aren't terribly difficult to solder by hand. I'll admit, I'm actually not the first person to recreate the programmer, and I probably never would have attempted this if I hadn't seen a blog post from Luis Cressoni showing that it was feasible to do. While he used a PIC microcontroller, I settled on an Arduino Mega 2560 because it has enough I/O to interface directly with the cartridge. Unfortunately, the cartridge requires 3.3 volts, so we do need to modify the Arduino to run at 3.3 volts as well. I reused a PCI connector for the cartridge slot, which has the same pitch of 1.27mm and works well when cut to the right length. I used magnet wire to connect each pin to a header on the Arduino, and this was super annoying to make. I will never do this again. Really, I should have just designed a PCB for this. No, go away, you're not a sponsor. Finally, I designed a 3D printed case with a keyed slot for the cart to prevent inserting it backwards. The resulting programmer is a bit bulky, but otherwise it looks and works well enough. On the software side, I found some great code examples to start with, as the flash memory chips are well documented and relatively common to interface with. I just needed to make a few changes to the number of address lines, along with adding a chip select function to allow programming both sides of the cartridge. The bigger problem was formatting and sending entire binary files in a way that was easy for the end user. I wound up using PowerShell to rapidly develop and hook into Windows serial functions without having to write everything from scratch. The script will prompt for cartridge side, COM port number, reader write, file name, and cartridge verification. I tried to make it as idiot-proof as possible to prevent frustration. You can also directly interface with the programmer using a serial terminal emulator capable of directly sending and receiving raw binary files, such as RealTerm. Linux users, you're on your own for this one.
This is Duke. He's the robot dog that I kind of made out of spare parts at the beginning. He's thrown together with a mishmash of different generations and different colors of robot, and I kind of wanted to embrace that by keeping kind of a mix of a color scheme, and I think it looks pretty good. And I named him Duke because I decided to make my own sound theme for him.
Okay, now to the fun bit, personality hacking. This is possible thanks to YICT, or Yanni Idolizes i-Cybie tweaking. The software is a bit clunky, but it allows for easy modification of behaviors. The added functions make the robot feel a lot more lifelike, and you can select from not just one, but many different actions to cycle through in response to button presses, mood changes, or other various conditions. The stock behaviors often felt very static and unfinished, with very simplistic and unvaried actions in response to button presses. The improved personalities use multiple variations of actions, offering multiple different poses for sitting and lying down, and much improved action variations such as multiple routines for standing up, waving, etc. And you can also add sounds. The i-Cybie featured, for the time, a quite good DSP chip, and can play back arbitrary sound samples. Using these tools, I created a new personality, Duke. The many quick one-liners from Duke Nukem 3D wound up being a perfect match for the i-Cybie, and hearing the i-Cybie say some of Duke's iconic one-liners is just absolutely hilarious to me.
Pigeon, come get some. Rockin'.
The walk-up charger functions can also be enabled in custom personalities, and it's fun seeing such an old robot able to dock and charge itself. It appears to use its regular IR rangefinder to detect the beacon from the charger. This gives the robot a general direction to follow, but the actual docking procedure basically uses a set of Dead Reckoning best guess program routines to try to get itself onto the charger. The shape of the dock plays a huge role in trying to catch the robot, and it's often unsuccessful or takes an excessively long time to dock with the charger. But it's still amazing to see such an ambitious feature executed with such limited hardware. Now, unfortunately, due to aging batteries and a lack of parts, getting these robots running again can be a challenge. I did find a few battery packs on Amazon that can be modified to work if you solder the original connector to them, but it requires splitting the pack in the middle for the center connector. I also built my own battery from scratch using a battery welder, but this still requires a donor connector. Likewise, mechanical failures are a real issue, and the number of spare robots is dwindling. I currently have 3 working robots. One sits on the shelf, one gets played with, and one stays in the original box. A 4th robot was a donor, and used to fix my other running robots, as the gears and clutches are notoriously fragile in some revisions. Luckily, I've seen a few recent efforts at i-Cybie preservation pop up. I would love to see more work done in making these clunky old robots useful again, so if you want to try to get your i-Cybie up and running, I would suggest joining the Discord server, linked in the description. It's full of friendly, like-minded individuals sharing what little information we still have left on these robots. Now, my cartridge programmer was kind of a pain to solder together, but if there's enough interest, I could try to produce a batch of plug-and-play programmer PCBs and some aftermarket cartridge PCBs to go with it. In the meantime, though, I do offer services to program existing cartridges or populate blank boards if you're desperate to get your hands on a particular program for your robot.
Well, as always, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed my little adventure on how I wasted way too much of my life making a cartridge programmer for this vintage dog. There's basically no information about these things anywhere online. It was basically lost to time once the i-Cybie forums went down. So if anyone out there is looking to do something similar, hopefully this video provides a little bit of information. I've got download links for everything I did. You can download that off my website, pilothobbies.com. Yeah, hopefully it's helpful. And if you don't have the ability to make your own cartridge, I do offer a service where you can send in your cartridge and I will populate it with the flash chips because I've got a lot of those spare left over. So if you want, you can send me your blank cartridges. I'll add flash chips to it and program it with whatever personality you want. I did always really like these robots, and even though they're nowhere near as capable or entertaining as something like a Sony AIBO, it does make a cool desk toy, and I don't know, I'm just really fond of them because it was, you know, my little childhood robot. So if you like this video, please leave a like. As always, make sure to subscribe, and thanks for watching.